restoring a vintage bike. Hi guys, I'm Dan at vintagevelo.org and today we are going to be restoring a vintage bike. It's quite an involved process doing a thorough restoration on a vintage bike, so we're going to split this video into three parts. The first part is frame appraisal and teardown, second part will be paint, and third part building back up and riding. Okay, first off, you want to restore a vintage bike and go through that restoration process. First off, pick the right frame. There are an awful lot of old bikes out there. Some are definitely worthy of restoration. Some, I'm afraid, you know, just they're never going to make financial sense or time and effort sense. The first thing I would say, when you've picked the bike that you want to use, check that frame carefully for crash damage. And when I say crash damage, normally it's going to show around the steerer tube area, around there and there. You're looking for dimples and marks on the underside and top side where if it's taken a frontal impact, it'll crimp those tubes. If it's got anything like that, put it to one side, get another frame to work on. Also, severe rust. Always going to expect a bit of surface rust, but if the thing is rotting, just again put it to one side, unless it's a particularly good frame, expensive frame like a Colnago or something. Otherwise, you know, weigh that up very carefully if it's worth the expense of that kind of professional repair. Now, what we have here is something really cool. It's a Lejeune French bike from dates from actually about 1975-ish. There's no date on the bike, but a rather handy serial number here for the Reynolds 531 tag. They change most years. So because it's got its original tube set tag, I can date it from that. So we're looking at a frame from about 1975. And as soon as I saw this bike, I knew what it could be. I knew how good this will look once it's been restored. And also it's got quite a cool story to it, I think. The reason why I think, because I've never met the original owner, so I don't really know its history. Now, one thing I do know about this bike, always when you grab a vintage bike, we're going to research a little bit, see what we've got. And this bike here, as I say, 1975. Now, it's not a team bike. The professional Lejeune team bikes were all made by Carré in France, and they have a very different seat stay finish here, and also the cable guides are different. They're on the underside and done slightly differently. So I know this is not a team bike. However, there are a couple of anomalies with this frame. First off, it's serial number 00, and it's got a couple of different parts. Very cool pantograph stem, which is almost impossible to find for Lejeune, and a couple of interesting little individual details on here I would not expect to see. And the parts fitted are a little bit strange. Now, what I think has happened, now Lejeune themselves did actually make amateur team bikes and crit racers as individual or order bespoke bikes as well. And I think this probably started out as one of those. I think it started out probably as a crit racer, criterion racer. And when the guy was finished with it, he stripped off his favourite parts and sold the frame on, probably in the early 80s. The reason why I say that, the Mafak racers, the brakes are from 1975. You can tell that because they're not red, they're silver. The handlebars, everything else, they're all original to the bike. However, the group set, the wheels, the saddle, these are not original parts to the bike, but they all date from exactly the same period, early 80s. So what we've got here, we've got Campagnolo hubs, stainless steel spokes, Campagnolo rims. We've got an odd Japanese Sakai SR crank and seat post. Don't know why. Also, we have late 70s Simplex Prestige group set on here. Now, what I think has happened, this bike, when the original owner was finished with it, stripped off his favourite parts, and the frame got sold to a club racer. And that club racer put on pretty much, you know, what were then, you know, high-end parts to build a very good club racing bike. What we have here, if we look at the Sakai crankset, Dream. Drillium, sorry. Now that is aluminium that's drilled out to be lighter. This can be done very well or very badly. This one done very, very well. Also, we note on the spokes on the Campagnolo wheels, the spokes have been wired and soldered. Now you would do that kind of thing to give them extra stiffness. And also the selection of the Simplex Prestige group set. Now these are generally considered as junk. And there's a good reason for that. But at the time when these things were being fitted, these were not junk. The Prestige range by Simplex used an awful lot of Delrin, a bit like it's an early plastic. But think of it like now, we have a lot of carbon fibre in our group sets, in our derailleurs. We don't think twice about that because it's a great thing to use if you want it light and modern. And at the time, Delrin, which is a kind of nylon-y plastic, was kind of cutting edge. And Simplex were the first guys to be using this in their derailleurs and shifters. Now, they were probably the only guys to use this because Delrin has a bit of a problem. When it's new, it's great. When it gets a little older, you're supposed to kind of feed it with a bit like linseed oil once every 6 months. I know it sounds strange, but you have to keep it kind of supple. If it dries out, it starts to crack. And therein lies the problem. No one fed them with oil as they were supposed to, and then after a few years they crack and they fail. Almost always it's going to crack on the front derailleur mount, so that's going to snap and fall off, but also catastrophically they will also snap clean off at the rear derailleur, and the derailleur will go into your wheels and take your wheel out at the same point. This one is in perfectly good order. I just don't think it's been ridden since probably about 1989, which is why it hasn't broken up. So those parts have to come off this bike. However, Simplex also made an excellent aluminium steel alloy version of the same group set, the Super LJ, which is by far superior to this anyway. A little bit heavier, but an excellent group set, a real Campagnolo equivalent. So that's going to be going on here. We'll be using Super LJ as a straight swap out. Now, a word of warning when we're selecting a bike to restore, this one's French. Be careful. Word of warning, a French frame. If you're buying something that's French, buy a complete bike, or you will drive yourself mad trying to find various parts that are just anomalies to that specific bike. You find with a lot of French bikes, there are for no reason at all sometimes a reverse thread, sometimes a harsh thread, sometimes they'll use a half, so like a 3.5 mil or 4.5 mil thread when they don't need to. It's just something, it's a peculiarity to French makers. It gets better as we move into the 80s and 90s, but certainly in the 70s or 60s, be very, very careful. If you're buying a French bike, buy a complete bike. Fortunately, this one is complete, so apart from swapping out those few parts, we'll be building it up with the original parts once all cleaned up. Also of note, we have an excellent Selle Italia roll saddle on the back here, and also more Drillium on the Mafac brakes up front. Someone really went to town with kind of turning this into a really good club racer. This is the old school equivalent of taking like a Cannondale Super 6 carbon fibre frame, popping on some lightweight carbon fibre rims, maybe Di2, and then some oversized jockey wheels and ceramic bearings, and then going for a local hill climb. It's that kind of a bike, but from 1980, which I think is kind of cool. But let's not hang around, we're just going to get straight in and take this apart. First thing I'm going to tackle is going to be the seat post. Notoriously, these are almost always stuck. Best thing to do, a few days before you think about stripping your bike down, soak that in WD-40 or impregnating fluid. You've got to get that, so as it's at least got a fighting chance of coming loose. This one I've already checked and I know it's going to be good, so I'm just going to loosen it off. But one thing I do have to check is whether the original seat post fitted to this bike will go up high enough for me to ride it. So I know that's going to be loose. Fortunately, the original owner, I think, greased this before we put it in. So that's how long it is, not the longest in the world. I'm going to take it down a little bit so as it comes down past the lug. So about there will be about the highest I think we can go. And I'm just going to measure my stack. Yeah, plenty there. That's at 80. So actually, when I'm done, yep, I'm going to be widening it about there. So the good thing is, I know I can build this bike up and I'm going to be sat high enough with the original parts to ride it. So that's great, and we'll take that part straight off. So these Mafak racers are really, really nice brakes. They will need new pads. These are totaled. But when you're taking these apart, do be careful. We'll change the lines and the cable housings. That's not an issue. But do be careful. This little connecting line here, I would normally try and keep hold of that if it's in a good state after a cleanup. They can be quite fiddly to change, so I like to keep those. And also your little parts here, just be careful. Don't lose any of that because it's all quite fiddly and needed. So that's those off. We'll keep hold of those. We'll clean them up at a later time. They'll just pop the back wheel off there. Really nice Campagnolo setup on here with hubs and rims, stainless spokes, and as I mentioned earlier, if I turn it around that way and bring it in, you might just be able to see here the soldered and wired spokes. That's done to give additional strength and additional stiffness to the rim for when you're going for it. It's a very period kind of modification. But our old friend, the straight cut cassette, is on here. This one, 15 to 19. So there's no way I'm riding that. My knees would explode. So that will come off. We'll probably put on a 1325, something like that on there, assuming we get the cage to work nicely on there. About halfway there. Always fascinating, some of the things you find as you get down deep into a frame. Just check this out. I'm getting nice and close here for you. I don't know whether you can see that. This is the seat post binder bolt. And I'm not sure whether it is original to the bike, but apart from just being bent, it's also been stretched. The first 3 lines of thread have actually opened right out. I think we can do better than that on the rebuild, but always keep hold of these little bits till the end, just so you know you've got everything. Oh, excellent. And yeah, getting lucky again. Now we've got a very nice Lejeune pantographed. It's a 3T, looks like about a 100 stem on there, and matching 3T bars as well. Very, very nice. We like those. As mentioned before, we have, so again, more drillium on the Mafak racer brakes. I think it's fair to say that these hoods have seen better days, and again I think yeah, they will be headed to the bin, obviously, but not until I've got the replacements. So the forks came out nice and easily. Good quality headset. Don't know the maker of it, but it's really nice, so we like that a lot. No surprises with the forks, nothing really to report, other than a close-up there shows you the state of the decals on this. And the reason for painting this frame, apart from the chips and the surface rust which needs addressing, the actual red itself has gone chalky. So rather than being the vibrant red it should be, it's a kind of flat pinky red, with a bit of kind of almost like a whitish flourish to it. So that has to be redone to bring it back to its original splendor. Now we're going to take the cups out now, and when you're doing that, it's the only time when we get the hammer out, but you need one of these. It's a proprietary headset tool. It'll knock the cups out nice. It just slides up inside, bosh, out it comes. No messing around. Don't try and knock them out with screwdrivers and stuff. Again, eBay, cheap, get one of these. Makes life a lot easier. Excellent. So that's the crank off. Again, always use the correct tool. These little crank pullers are really cheap on eBay. No bashing from the back with a hammer and a screwdriver. No, no, no. Just use one of those. They'll come off no problem. And again here, let me bring you in close. Just check out the work here. The drillium on the chainring, the little slotting work, different individual holes, every other hole different size. This has been done really, really well. Often with Drillium, it's just a guy with a drill press and off he goes, and it looks pretty rough. This really, really good. And as I say, it's a Sake Silstar crank. Let's be fair, that's a record rip-off, isn't it? Without a doubt. But it's pretty nice. A 170 crank, so not crazy long either. Let's carry on and get the rest off. Great, we've now got this back to a bare frame. Bottom bracket came off pretty easily, which is great because it's a Silstar Japanese Sakai made crank with a very strange 35 by P1 thread, which I'm pretty sure would be a challenge to match if it was shot, but it's good, so we're okay. Things I learned about the frame as we went along, no real surprises. The whole frame is made of 531 Reynolds, which is good. It's an excellent frame tube set. Of note on the decal, if it ever says tray tubey, that just means you've got 3 tubes that are made of 531. This one is the full set of 531, which is excellent. Also of note, my decals, the Lejeune decals on these are not standard ones for some reason. I've been looking online, there's no off-the-shelf replacement decal sets, so I've taken photographs and measurements and buzzed them over to our friends at Velocals, who will recreate the exact same ones ready to go on the freshly painted bike, which will be in the next video in this series. I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. Do like and subscribe for more vintage bike builds, racing and anything that's cool to do with bikes. Thanks a lot.